A woman was humiliated for her old truck at a fair, but when she tilted the cab, she left everyone speechless. Cyrus Thorne's voice boomed across the dusty lot. "Look at this piece of junk! I bet that thing doesn't even start!" The crowd of ranchers and truckers roared with laughter. Leah Jones just stood there, a calm look on her face, her hand resting on the grill of her old Kenworth. Then she took a step toward the cab, and the move she was about to make would silence every single person in the yard. This was the annual Montana State Agri-Expo in Bozeman, a place where big money and bigger egos collided. Leah, an independent trucker in her early 30s, was there to prove something. That skill and heart mattered more than a fat wallet. Her plan was simple but dangerous. It involved a secret hidden under the cab, a challenge no one saw coming, and a gamble that could either make her a legend or ruin her completely. But can true talent ever really win against entrenched power and prejudice? If you believe that true worth lies beneath the surface, hit that like button, subscribe for more incredible stories, and comment with your city and the word truth to show your support. The air at the Montana State Agri-Expo was thick with the smell of diesel, grilled burgers, and money. Gleaming new Peterbilts and Freightliners were parked in perfect rows, their chrome blinding under the high summer sun. Salesmen in crisp shirts and cowboy hats pitched the latest in agricultural technology, their voices competing with the low rumble of idling engines and the twang of country music from unseen speakers. This was a world of power, a showcase for men who measured their worth in horsepower and acres. Into this arena of polished steel and machismo rolled Leah Jones. Her truck, a 1985 Kenworth K100 cabover, was the opposite of everything on display. Its blue paint was faded and chipped, bearing the scars of 1,000,000 miles on harsh highways. She called it Old Blue, and it was more than a machine to her. It was a testament to her independence, a business she had built with her own 2 hands. As she carefully maneuvered the old rig into a designated spot near the engine exhibition area, the conversations around her quieted. Heads turned, eyes narrowed, whispers started to ripple through the crowd. Leah swung down from the cab, landing softly on the dusty ground. She ignored the stares. She was used to them. Being a black woman in the long-haul trucking industry meant she was always an outsider. She wore practical jeans, steel-toed boots, and a simple work shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing toned, grease-stained forearms. She moved with a quiet confidence that seemed to irritate the men watching her. The whispers grew louder, turning into open snickers. A group of foremen in matching Thorne cattle cumbered hats were the loudest. At their center stood the man who owned not just the hats, but seemingly the entire county, Cyrus Thorne. He was a mountain of a man in his late 50s, with a face weathered by the sun and a gaze as hard as granite. He owned the largest ranch in the state and a fleet of over 200 brand-new trucks. To him, Leah and her old Kenworth were an insult. He strode toward her, his expensive ostrich skin boots kicking up dust. His men followed like vultures. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Cyrus's voice was a low growl that cut through the noise of the fair. "Did the scrap yard make a wrong turn?" His crew erupted in laughter. Leah didn't flinch. She simply turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I'm here for the Engine Expo, Mr. Thorne, just like you." Cyrus scoffed, looking Old Blue up and down with disgust. "The Engine Expo? Honey, this is for showcasing performance and innovation. That thing," he gestured dismissively at her truck, "belongs in a museum or a junkyard. I can't decide which." "It gets the job done," Leah said, her voice even. "I'm sure it does," Cyrus sneered. "Hauling what? A load of good intentions? A rig like this is an embarrassment to the profession. A woman's place. Well, it ain't behind the wheel of a relic like this." The insult hung in the air, sharp and ugly. The crowd grew, drawn by the confrontation. No one challenged Cyrus Thorne. He held too many contracts, owned too much land. Siding against him was career suicide. So they watched, some with amusement, others with a flicker of shame they quickly hid. Leah felt a familiar fire ignite in her chest, a heat she had learned long ago to control. Showing anger was showing weakness. Instead, she let a small, knowing smile touch her lips. "This relic has a few surprises, Mr. Thorne." "Oh, I'm sure it does," he mocked. "Does the rust hold it together? Or is it the duct tape I see on the bumper?" More laughter. "Listen, do us all a favor. Get this pile of bolts out of here before it leaks oil all over the pavement and lowers the property value." He turned to the announcer at the Engine Expo stage. "Hey, Bill, make sure you don't park any real trucks next to this one. The tetanus might be contagious." The announcer, a nervous man who clearly worked for one of Thorne's sponsors, forced a laugh. The humiliation was complete. Leah was surrounded, isolated, and being ridiculed by the most powerful man at the fair. She could see it in their faces. They expected her to break, to get angry or cry or climb back into her truck and leave in shame. But Leah didn't do any of those things. She stood her ground, her gaze locked on Cyrus. She had known this would happen. She had counted on it. The disrespect, the arrogance, the absolute certainty of men like him. It was the fuel she needed. This wasn't just about a truck. It was about every door that had been slammed in her face, every time she was told she didn't belong. She looked from Cyrus's smug face to the expectant crowd. She took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the silence stretch. It was time. All the late nights in her garage, the saved-up paychecks, the secret work nobody knew about, it all came down to this moment. She walked calmly to the side of her cab and placed her hand on the large, greasy latch that held it in place. The silence was now absolute. Everyone was waiting to see what she would do next. With a metallic groan, the latch released. Leah put her shoulder into it, using her entire body weight to begin the slow, deliberate process of tilting the massive cab forward. The hydraulic assist hissed, a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the dead silence. Cyrus Thorne crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. He thought she was just showing off a standard, grimy engine, a desperate, pathetic attempt to prove her truck was functional. "What's the matter, little lady? Need a hand with that?" he taunted, getting another round of chuckles from his inner circle. Leah ignored him. She kept pushing until the cab was fully tilted, locking into place with a solid thud. And then the world went quiet again. The chuckles died in their throats. The smirks vanished. What lay exposed on the frame of Old Blue was not the expected greasy, worn-out engine from 1985. It wasn't a relic. It was a beast. Nestled in the chassis was a pristine, massive engine block painted a deep, menacing black. It was immaculate. Gleaming chrome valve covers reflected the shocked faces of the crowd. Intricate braided steel lines for fuel and oil crisscrossed its surface with surgical precision. But the centerpiece, the detail that made every trucker and mechanic in the audience suck in a sharp breath, was the pair of enormous polished turbochargers sitting atop the manifold like two silver fists ready to punch a hole in the sky. It was a modern, custom-built twin-turbo diesel engine, a work of art and raw power, sitting inside the shell of a truck everyone had dismissed as scrap. A low whistle came from the edge of the crowd. An older man in grease-stained overalls, a veteran mechanic named Earl, who had seen it all, pushed his way to the front. He leaned in, his eyes scanning the setup with a professional's gaze. He looked at the custom fabrication of the mounts, the flawless welding, the sheer audacity of the build. He looked back at Leah, his expression a mixture of disbelief and profound respect. "That's a Caterpillar C-15, Earl said, his voice full of awe. "But not like any C-15 I've ever seen. This is a custom job. The manifold, the turbos, the intercooler setup. My God, girl, who built this for you?" Leah wiped a smudge of grease from her cheek with the back of her hand. "I did," she said simply. Her voice, though quiet, carried across the stunned crowd. "Took me 2 years. Every dollar I made went into it. Built it in my own garage, piece by piece." Cyrus Thorne stared, his face a mask of confusion. that was slowly hardening into rage. He was being upstaged, humiliated, by a woman with a junk truck. "That's impossible," he sputtered. "You're lying. You bought that crate engine and had someone install it." "Go ahead. Look for a manufacturer's plate on the full assembly," Leah challenged, gesturing toward the engine. "You won't find one. I machined some of these parts myself." Earl leaned in again, running a finger along a weld on the exhaust manifold. "The welds are too clean for a factory line," he confirmed to the crowd. "This is hand done, and it's perfect." The tide of opinion was turning, and fast. The ranchers and truckers who had been laughing moments before were now pushing closer, their eyes wide with admiration. They were a tough crowd, but they respected skill and hard work above all else. And what they were looking at was mastery. They started talking amongst themselves, pointing out details, their tones shifting from mockery to genuine excitement. "Look at the size of that intercooler. She must have had to reinforce the whole frame for that torque. I've never seen anything like it outside of a pulling competition." Cyrus felt control slipping away. His public shaming of Leah was backfiring spectacularly. He had to regain the upper hand. "So you put a fancy engine in a pile of junk," he boomed, trying to project his old authority. "What's the point? The rest of the truck will fall apart the second you put any power down. It's all for show. That rust bucket probably can't even beat one of my stock trucks off the line." It was the opening Leah had been waiting for. She turned her full attention back to him, her calm demeanor now having a sharp, dangerous edge. "Is that a challenge, Mr. Thorne?" He was taken aback. "What? You said my truck is all show." "You said it can't perform," Leah said, her voice rising so everyone could hear. "You've got a whole fleet of brand new top-of-the-line rigs over there. Let's see if your money can beat my work." The crowd buzzed with energy. This was better than any planned exhibition. This was real. "I'm not going to waste my time racing that," Cyrus said, gesturing with contempt. "What's the matter?" Leah pressed, a confident smile now on her face. "Afraid? Afraid this pile of junk will embarrass your shiny new fleet in front of all your friends and customers?" She had him cornered. To refuse now would be to admit fear. It would be a show of weakness he couldn't afford. His face turned a deep shade of red. His fists clenched and unclenched at his sides. "Fine," he snarled. "You want a race? You've got one. My best driver in my best truck. That brand new Peterbilt 389 right there." He pointed to a magnificent long-nosed truck, deep red with chrome flames, the jewel of his fleet. "Against that." "Good," Leah said. "But we race for stakes," Cyrus added, a cruel glint in his eye. "When I win, you pack up this embarrassment, you leave this fair, and you never show your face in this county again. You and your scrapyard on wheels will be gone." The crowd murmured. The stakes were high. For Leah, it meant losing her livelihood and her home. "And when I win?" Leah asked, her voice steady as a rock. Cyrus laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You won't." "Let's just say I do," she insisted. "When I win, you give me the hauling contract for the Northern Pastures, the one you just signed with Miller Corp. 5 years. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The Northern Pastures contract was the most lucrative deal in the region, worth millions. It was a contract that could set up an independent trucker for life. To Cyrus, it was a flagship account, a symbol of his dominance. Losing it would be a massive financial and symbolic blow. He stared at her. His eyes narrowed to slits. He saw the trap, but his pride was already too deep in it. He looked at his pristine $1 million truck, then back at her faded, rust-spotted Kenworth. The engine was impressive, sure, but it was one part. A race was about the whole machine, the driver, the transmission, the rear ends. There was no way, he thought, that her homemade project could beat a perfectly engineered machine straight from the factory. The risk was zero. The reward was getting rid of this woman for good. "You've got a deal," Cyrus growled, spitting the words out. He turned to one of his foremen. "Get Jake. Tell him to get the 389 fired up. I want to see this junk heap get humiliated." Leah simply nodded. She walked back to her cab, a quiet determination in her eyes. As the crowd parted to give her space, she pulled herself up into the driver's seat. She didn't look at Cyrus. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at the empty stretch of paved lot they had designated as the makeshift track. It wasn't just a race for a contract. It was a race for respect, and she had no intention of losing. The crowd scrambled back, forming a wide, human-walled lane down the main paved thoroughfare of the fairgrounds. At the far end, maybe a quarter-mile away, stood an old, rusted water tower that marked the unofficial finish line. The nervous announcer, Bill, grabbed his microphone, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to bring order to the chaos. "All right, folks, it looks like we have an impromptu, exhibition. Please stay clear of the track. The race will be from this starting line to the base of the water tower." From the line of Thorn cattle-compassed trucks, the red Peterbilt 389 roared to life. The sound was a deep, throaty and perfectly tuned rumble, the sound of expensive factory-made power. It rolled forward with an intimidating presence, its chrome grille flashing in the sun like a predator's teeth. At the wheel was Jake, Cyrus's top driver. He was a man in his late 20s, with a cocky grin and the unearned confidence of someone who had always been given the best equipment. He maneuvered the massive truck to the starting line, idling next to the spot where Leah would pull up. Leah reached forward and turned the key in Old Blue's ignition. For a second, there was nothing but the click of the solenoid. A few of Cyrus's men snickered. Then, with a deafening roar, the custom C-15 engine exploded into life. It wasn't the polished rumble of the Peterbilt. It was a raw, violent and angry sound, a mechanical scream that shook the ground. Black smoke belched from the tall, straight exhaust stacks before clearing up as the engine settled into a loping, aggressive idle. The turbos whistled ominously, a promise of the power waiting to be unleashed. She carefully lowered the cab, locking it back into place with a heavy clang. She eased the truck forward, the chassis groaning under the immense torque of the engine even at idle. She pulled Old Blue alongside the gleaming Peterbilt. The contrast was stark, almost comical. The brand-new, flawless machine versus the faded, scarred veteran. David versus Goliath on 16 wheels. Jake leaned out his window, looking down at Leah in her cab over. "You sure you want to go through with this, sweetheart?" He yelled over the noise of the engines. "No shame in backing out now. We can just say your battery died." Leah didn't even look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the water tower in the distance. She rested one hand on the worn gear shifter. Her knuckles were scarred, her fingernails permanently rimmed with grease. She knew every inch of this machine because she had built it. She knew the exact point in the RPM range where the turbos would hit their peak efficiency. She knew how the reinforced frame would twist slightly under full power. She knew its strengths and, more importantly, its weaknesses. Jake just knew how to drive a truck off a lot. Cyrus Thorn stood near the starting line, his arms crossed, a smug certainty on his face. He had seen Leah's engine, but he was a man who believed in systems. His truck was a complete system, engineered by a billion-dollar company for peak performance. Her truck was a hodgepodge of old parts and one big engine. In his mind, the outcome was already decided. This was just the formality of the execution. The old mechanic, Earl, stood near the front of the crowd, his face a knot of concentration. He wasn't watching the trucks. He was listening. He could hear the difference in the engines. The Peterbilt was powerful, but predictable. Leah's engine sounded untamed, almost dangerous. He knew that if she could keep it from tearing itself apart, this wouldn't be a race. It would be a demolition. "Drivers, are you ready?" Bill the announcer shouted into the microphone, his voice barely audible over the two idling behemoths. Jake gave a thumbs up, revving his engine. The Peterbilt's roar deepened, clean and powerful. Leah simply nodded, her hand tightening on the shifter. Her foot hovered over the clutch. Inside the cab, it was hot and loud. The gauges on her custom dashboard were her only focus. Oil pressure, stable, engine temp, climbing, but good. Boost gauges, sitting at 0, waiting. This was it. 2 years of work, of sacrificing weekends and holidays, of pouring every cent she had into a dream that everyone else would have called scrap metal. It all came down to the next 15 seconds. Bill raised a green flag high above his head. The crowd held its breath. The world seemed to shrink to the quarter-mile stretch of pavement. "On my mark!" Bill yelled. 3, 2, 1, go! He slashed the flag down. Jake was a professional, and his truck was built for it. He dropped the clutch and stomped the accelerator in a single, smooth motion. The Peterbilt's advanced drivetrain and traction control managed the power perfectly. The tires chirped once, then bit into the asphalt. The big red truck surged forward, launching off the line with incredible efficiency. Leah's start was different. It was violent. When she dumped the clutch, the raw, unregulated power of the C-15 hit the drivetrain like a sledgehammer. The rear tires, unable to handle the sudden, brutal torque, broke loose. For a terrifying second, Old Blue didn't move forward. It just sat there, screaming, enveloping itself in a massive cloud of white tire smoke. The crowd gasped. Cyrus Thorne let out a triumphant laugh. "She can't even get it off the line," he roared. "The engine is too much for the truck." Jake saw it in his mirror. He was already 2 truck lengths ahead and pulling away. He grinned, thinking the race was already over. He shifted into the next gear, the automated transmission doing the work for him, keeping the engine in its perfect power band. But inside the smoke, Leah was working. She wasn't panicking. She had anticipated this. She knew the truck's first instinct would be to destroy its own tires. She feathered the throttle, letting the engine RPMs drop just enough for the tires to stop spinning and find traction. The moment she felt them grip, she floored it again. Old Blue shot out of the cloud of smoke like a cannonball. The acceleration was savage, pinning Leah back in her seat. The front end of the old Kenworth lifted slightly as the power transferred to the pavement. The roar of the engine changed as the twin turbos spooled up, their high-pitched whine turning into a piercing shriek that cut through the air. The crowd, which had collectively sighed in disappointment, now let out a roar of astonishment. The faded blue truck was no longer just a truck, it was a missile on the asphalt. Jake heard the scream of her engine and glanced in his mirror again. The grin on his face evaporated. The blue speck that had been lost in smoke was now a massive, rapidly growing shape. Old Blue was closing the distance at an impossible rate. He pushed his own accelerator to the floor, but he was already at maximum power. He was driving a fast truck. Leah was piloting a rocket. By the halfway point, she had erased his lead. The 2 trucks were now side by side, thundering down the pavement, the ground shaking beneath them. The noise was apocalyptic. The polished red Peterbilt was straining, its engine at its absolute limit. Beside it, the old rattling Kenworth looked like it was being torn apart by the sheer force of its own engine. But it kept coming. Leah grabbed the shifter and slammed it into the next gear with a brutal, practiced motion. The truck bucked, the engine screamed even higher, and for the first time, the nose of Old Blue began to pull ahead of the Peterbilt's chrome grille. Cyrus Thorne's jaw went slack. From his vantage point, he could see the nose of the faded blue cabover inch past his driver's window. It wasn't supposed to happen. It was a statistical, mechanical, and financial impossibility. His fists clenched so tight, his knuckles turned white. "What is Jake doing?" he snarled to the foreman beside him. "He's letting her win." "Boss, he's flat out," the foreman replied, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "There's nothing more in that engine. Listen to it." He was right. The Peterbilt was screaming at the top of its RPM range, a clean, high-performance roar. But Leah's truck was producing a sound from another dimension. The shriek of the turbos was now so intense it hurt the ears, a physical force that seemed to bend the air itself. Inside the Peterbilt's cab, Jake was in a cold sweat. He had the pedal mashed to the floor, his eyes darting between the road and his mirrors. Leah's truck wasn't just passing him, it was pulling away, the old, scarred, trailerless rig moving with the brutal agility of a sports car. The reflection in his mirror showed the grille of Old Blue, looking like a monster's grin. He saw Leah in her cab, a figure of pure concentration, her hands steady on the wheel as her truck vibrated around her as if it might disintegrate. He felt a professional shame so deep, it was nauseating. He was losing, and it wasn't even close. Leah felt the surge of victory, a hot rush of adrenaline. But then a flicker of red on her custom dash caught her eye, a small LED she had wired to a thermocouple on the exhaust manifold. It was the EGT, exhaust gas temperature, warning. It was blinking. A steady blink at first, then faster. She was pushing the engine too hard for too long. The internal temperatures were reaching critical levels. If she kept her foot down, she risked melting a piston or blowing a turbo. The engine that was her masterpiece could turn into a million metal fragments in a heartbeat. She had a choice: ease off, save the engine, and lose the race, or push it for another 5 seconds and risk everything she had built. She glanced at the water tower, now just a few hundred yards away, so close. She thought of Cyrus's sneering face, of his words, "A woman's place." She thought of the 5-year contract. This wasn't just about one race. This was about her future. Her eyes flicked from the blinking red light to the finish line. She made her decision. She kept her foot planted firmly on the floor. "Come on, Blue," she whispered, her voice tight. "Hold together. Just a little longer." The truck shuddered. A new, more metallic sound joined the engine's roar, a high-frequency vibration that told her something was straining to its breaking point. The red light was no longer blinking. It was a solid, screaming crimson. Back at the starting line, a man in a tailored suit and a crisp Panama hat stood watching the spectacle with a calm, analytical expression. This was David Harrison, the regional logistics manager for Miller Corp. He was the man who had signed the Northern Pastures contract with Cyrus Thorne just last week. His assistant, a young woman with a tablet, stood beside him. "Is that the truck he was making fun of?" Harrison asked, not taking his eyes off the race. "Yes, sir," the assistant confirmed, looking at her notes. "A 1985 Kenworth K100 registered to an independent operator, Leah Jones." Harrison watched as the Kenworth pulled decisively ahead of the Thorne Company truck. It was now a full truck length ahead and still accelerating. "And Mr. Thorne wagered our new contract on this race?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "That's what we're hearing from the crowd, sir. His truck and company against hers. The contract for her banishment from the county." Harrison allowed a small, thin smile to cross his lips. "Cyrus is a proud man. It seems his pride just cost him dearly. Make a note, Sarah. I want a full profile on Leah Jones, mechanical expertise, safety record, everything. If her business acumen is half as impressive as her engineering, we may be in business with a far more interesting partner." Cyrus saw Harrison watching. He felt a wave of cold dread wash over him that had nothing to do with the race. He wasn't just losing to Leah, he was losing his reputation for shrewd business in front of a major client. His empire was built on an image of untouchable power and control. That image was currently being shredded by a woman in a 30-year-old truck. Leah crossed the finish line at the base of the water tower. She didn't just win, she annihilated him. She was a full 3 truck lengths ahead when she finally took her foot off the accelerator. The sudden deceleration was almost as violent as the launch. She pumped the brakes, the air system hissing in protest, and brought the shuddering, overheating beast to a halt in a cloud of dust and diesel fumes. The moment she turned the key, the engine died with a final gasping clank. A plume of white smoke, likely steam, billowed from under the cab. The race was over. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment the entire fairground was frozen. Then the crowd erupted. It wasn't just polite applause. It was a wild, cathartic roar. They had witnessed the impossible. The ultimate underdog had not only won, but had done so with breathtaking dominance. Truckers, who had been laughing at her minutes ago, were now cheering her name. Leah leaned her forehead against the steering wheel, her entire body trembling with adrenaline and exhaustion. The engine was likely damaged, maybe severely, but it had held. She had won. She took a deep, shaky breath, the smell of hot metal and victory filling her lungs. She pushed the door open and climbed down from the cab, her legs unsteady. She stood there for a moment, looking at the smoking, ticking machine that had carried her to this point. Then she turned and looked back down the track. Jake was slowly driving the Peterbilt back, his face pale and grim. The crowd was parting for him, but their eyes were all on Leah. Cyrus Thorne was storming toward her, his face purple with rage. His men followed, but they kept their distance, unsure of what he would do. "You cheated!" Cyrus bellowed as he got close, his voice hoarse. "There's something illegal in that engine. Nitrous. Something." Leah just looked at him, her expression calm. "You saw the engine yourself, Cyrus. Everyone did. There's no nitrous, just good engineering and hard work. Something you hire people to do for you. This isn't over," he snarled, jabbing a finger in her face. "The bet's off. You damaged the track. You were reckless." "A bet is a bet," a calm voice said from behind them. Cyrus and Leah both turned. David Harrison of Miller Corp was walking toward them, his assistant Sarah right behind him. He stopped and looked from Cyrus's enraged face to Leah's tired but resolute one. "Mr. Thorne," Harrison said, his tone all business, "I believe you owe Ms. Jones a contract." Cyrus Thorne's head snapped toward David Harrison. The sight of the Miller Corp executive, the man whose business represented a significant portion of his yearly revenue, standing there with an unreadable expression, sent a jolt of pure panic through him. His anger at Leah was instantly replaced by the cold fear of a businessman about to lose a major deal. He forced his features into a semblance of a smile, a grotesque twisting of his enraged face. "David, just a little friendly competition, you know how it is," Cyrus said, his voice a strained attempt at casualness. "This doesn't mean anything. Our deal stands, of course." Harrison ignored him completely. His focus was entirely on Leah. He extended a hand. "Ms. Jones, I'm David Harrison, Miller Corporation." That was the most impressive display of mechanical engineering and driving skill I have ever witnessed. Leah, still running on adrenaline, shook his hand. Her grip was firm, her hand calloused and stained with grease. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison." "Cyrus," Harrison said, finally turning his cool gaze back to the rancher, "our contract with you had a standard performance and conduct clause. Wagering our business in a public spectacle because your pride was wounded strikes me as profoundly unprofessional. Furthermore," he gestured to the two trucks, "your state-of-the-art equipment was soundly beaten by what you publicly called junk. And that doesn't inspire confidence in your fleet's capabilities." Cyrus paled. "Now, David, let's not be hasty. It was a joke. A misunderstanding." "Was it?" Harrison countered. "Because from where I was standing it looked like you tried to publicly humiliate a competitor and lost. Badly. According to the terms of your own bet, the Northern Pastures contract now belongs to Ms. Jones." "That's preposterous," Cyrus sputtered. "She can't handle that contract. She has one truck, and it's half broken." He pointed a trembling finger at the steam still rising from Old Blue's engine bay. "My truck will be fine," Leah said, her voice finding its strength again. "It just needs to cool down, and I can handle the work. I can hire other owner-operators. I can build a business." Harrison nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "Indeed. A business founded by someone with your hands-on expertise is exactly the kind of partner Miller Corp looks for. We value innovation and grit, Ms. Jones, not just the size of a fleet." He turned back to Cyrus, his voice now turning to ice. "As of this moment, Thorne Cattle Cover's contract for the Northern Pastures is terminated. Sarah, please draw up a preliminary 5-year agreement for Ms. Jones's company. We can discuss the logistics and fleet expansion requirements on Monday morning." The world seemed to tilt for Cyrus Thorne. The public humiliation, the loss of the race, that was one thing. But to have a multi-million-dollar contract ripped away from him and handed to the very person he had tried to destroy, right in front of the entire community, was a blow he couldn't comprehend. His empire, which had seemed so solid just an hour ago, now had a massive crack running through it. His men stood by, silent and stunned. They had followed him out of fear and for a paycheck. But now they saw his powerlessness. They looked from his defeated face to Leah, who stood tall, grease-stained and victorious. Respect was shifting, allegiances were fracturing. "You can't do this," Cyrus whispered, the bluster gone from his voice, replaced by desperation. "I can, and I have," Harrison said flatly. He turned to Leah. "My office, Monday, 9 a.m. We'll have our people look over your truck and assess what you'll need. We're prepared to offer a significant signing bonus to help you scale up your operation quickly. Consider it an investment in talent." With a final, decisive nod, Harrison and his assistant turned and walked away, leaving a crater of silence in their wake. The crowd, which had been watching the exchange with rapt attention, began to buzz. The story was already taking on the shape of a legend. The woman with the junk truck, who took down the king. Defeated and utterly broken, Cyrus Thorne turned without another word and walked back toward his line of trucks, his shoulders slumped. His aura of invincibility was gone, replaced by the stench of failure. His driver, Jake, avoided his eyes as he climbed out of the Peterbilt. There would be no celebration for the Thorne Cattle Co. tonight. As Cyrus retreated, a new crowd began to form, this time around Leah. It was a different kind of crowd. The old mechanic, Earl, was the first to approach her. "Young lady," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I've been working on trucks for 50 years. I've never seen anything like what you did today. Not just the engine, but the driving. You knew that machine down to its soul." He looked at Old Blue, which was still ticking and steaming. "She's hurt, but she's got a good heart. If you need a hand getting her patched up, my shop is yours. No charge." "Thank you, Earl," Leah said, genuinely touched. "I might take you up on that." Other truckers came forward, men who had been laughing at her earlier. They didn't apologize. That wasn't their way, but they showed their respect. "Hell of a run," one said, tipping his hat. "You got a set of gears on you, I'll give you that," said another. "If you're looking for drivers for that new contract," a third one offered, "you keep me in mind. I'd rather drive for someone who knows what's under the hood than some suit in an office." Leah was overwhelmed. For years, she had been an outsider, tolerated but never accepted. She had worked in the shadows, saving her money, honing her skills, fueled by a quiet determination. Now, in the space of a single afternoon, she had become a leader. She had won more than a contract. She had won her place. She looked at Old Blue, her partner in this impossible victory. The risk had been immense. The engine could have exploded, ruining years of work and leaving her with nothing. But it had held. She had trusted her work, trusted her skill, and it had paid off. She still had a mountain to climb. She had to repair her truck, build a company from scratch, and manage a massive contract. Cyrus Thorne was a man who didn't forgive or forget. He would surely seek revenge. The road ahead was long and difficult, but for the first time, she wasn't on it alone. She had earned her respect, not with money or power, but with skill, courage, and a whole lot of horsepower hidden inside a shell nobody believed in. Standing there, covered in dust and smelling of diesel, Leah Jones smiled. The real work was just beginning. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fairgrounds, the reality of the day's events began to sink in for everyone. For Leah, the adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion and the daunting weight of opportunity. Earl, true to his word, had already called in a favor and had a heavy-duty tow truck on its way to carefully transport Old Blue to his workshop on the edge of town. "Don't you worry," he said, patting the Kenworth's hot fender like it was a prized racehorse. "We'll get her opened up. See what that little stunt of yours cost us. Probably a warped head gasket, Maybe some scored cylinder walls, but nothing we can't fix. The bones are good." Leah nodded, a wave of gratitude making it hard to speak. "Earl, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," he grunted. "I haven't seen a man with the guts to stand up to Cyrus Thorne in 20 years. Watching you do it was payment enough. Now, you go home, get some rest. You've got a big day on Monday." Meanwhile, across town in his sprawling ranch house, Cyrus Thorne was not resting. He was pacing his cavernous office like a caged lion, a half-empty bottle of expensive whiskey on his mahogany desk. The news of his public humiliation had spread through the county like wildfire. His phone hadn't stopped ringing for hours. Calls from other ranchers, business partners, even the local bank manager, all cloaked in feigned concern, but really just probing for weakness. His foreman, a man named Hank, stood nervously by the door. "Boss, the men they're talking about what happened." Cyrus slammed his hand down on the desk, rattling the whiskey bottle. "Let them talk. They work for me. They get their paychecks from me. A little race doesn't change that." "It's not just the race, sir," Hank said carefully. "It's the contract, losing the Miller account. That's the biggest livestock hauling job in the state. The drivers are worried about their routes, their hours. There will be other contracts," Cyrus roared, but his voice lacked conviction. The Miller contract wasn't just profitable, it was prestigious. It was the cornerstone of his logistics division. Losing it made him look vulnerable, and in his world, vulnerability was a death sentence. He stopped pacing and stared out the large window at his fleet of trucks, parked in perfect silent rows under the security lights. They looked like monuments to a power that was already fading. He thought of Leah Jones. He had dismissed her, insulted her, tried to crush her, and in doing so, he had created her. He had handed her the fame, the respect, and the very contract he coveted most. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. "This isn't over," he muttered to himself, his voice a low, venomous growl. "She thinks she won. She has no idea what she's up against. She has one truck, no infrastructure, no capital. That signing bonus from Harrison won't last a month. She'll fail, and when she does, I'll be there to pick up the pieces." His mind started working, shifting from blind rage to cold, calculated strategy. He couldn't beat her with horsepower. He had already tried and failed. But there were other ways to win a war. He could undercut her prices with other clients, even at a loss, to bleed her dry. He could use his influence with suppliers to make it difficult for her to get parts. He could lean on the local Doty inspectors to harass her at every way station. He would make running her business so difficult, so expensive, so soul-crushing that she would either quit or go bankrupt. "Hank," he said, his voice now calm and chilling, "get me a list of every independent driver who offered her help today. I want their names." Hank nodded slowly, understanding the unspoken threat. "Yes, sir." The next morning, Leah woke up in her small rented house on the outskirts of Bozeman. For a moment, she thought the events of the previous day had been a dream. Then she saw the grease still under her fingernails and the business card for David Harrison sitting on her nightstand. It was real. She was sore, exhausted, but filled with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. Her first stop was Earl's garage. The place was a cathedral of machinery, filled with the smell of oil and old metal. Old Blue was already in a service bay, the cab tilted forward. Earl and two of his best mechanics were gathered around the exposed engine, their expressions a mix of reverence and clinical concern. "Well, the news is good and bad," Earl said as Leah approached. "The good news is you didn't blow the whole thing to kingdom come. The block is intact, the turbos didn't seize. The bad news is you pushed it right to the edge. You've got a blown head gasket for sure, and one of the pistons is showing signs of heat damage. We need to tear it down to be sure, but you're looking at a serious rebuild." "How long?" Leah asked, her heart sinking a little. "A week if we work around the clock. Maybe 2 if we find more damage," Earl said. "And it won't be cheap." Leah's mind raced. Her meeting with Miller Corp was tomorrow. They were expecting her to have a plan, to be ready to start hauling. Showing up with her only truck out of commission for 2 weeks was not the first impression she wanted to make. As if on cue, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "This is Leah Jones." "Miss Jones, my name is Marcus Thorne." Leah froze. The name was a punch to the gut. "Any relation to Cyrus?" she asked, her voice guarded. "He's my father," the voice on the other end said. There was a pause. "Which is why I'm calling. I saw what you did yesterday. My father is a difficult man. He doesn't take losing well. I'm calling to warn you." "Warn me about what?" "He's going to come after you," Marcus said. "Not in a race. He'll use his money, his influence. He'll try to ruin you in the marketplace. He's already making calls, telling suppliers not to sell you parts, telling other clients he'll haul for them at a loss just to starve you out." Leah leaned against a workbench, feeling a new kind of pressure. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because my father's way of doing business is old and rotten," Marcus said, a hint of anger in his voice. "He bullies people. He believes power is the only thing that matters. You proved him wrong yesterday. I've been trying to get him to modernize, to treat people with respect for years. He won't listen. Maybe seeing a real competitor rise up will force him to change, or maybe he'll just get crushed. Either way, I think it's for the best. Be careful, Ms. Jones. He won't play fair." The line went dead. Leah stood there, the phone in her hand, the news settling in. She had won the battle. But the war was just beginning. She was no longer just an independent trucker. She was a target. Cyrus Thorne wasn't just a sore loser. He was a powerful enemy who was actively working to ensure her failure. The challenge was no longer just about fixing an engine. It was about surviving an assault from a man who would stop at nothing to see her destroyed. The phone call from Marcus Thorne was a splash of ice water. The euphoria of her victory evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard pragmatism. Leah looked at the disassembled engine of Old Blue, the heart of her operation lying in pieces on Earl's workshop floor. Cyrus wasn't going to wait for her to get back on her feet. He was going to kick her while she was down. "Earl," she said, her voice firm, "forget the rebuild for now. Just get it patched. Whatever it takes to make it run reliably for a few weeks. We don't have time for perfect." Earl raised an eyebrow. "Patching a job like this is risky. You could do more damage." "It's riskier to show up to a multi-million-dollar contract meeting with no truck and no plan," Leah countered. "Cyrus is already making moves. I need to be operational, and I need to be operational yesterday." Seeing the steel in her eyes, Earl nodded. "All right, you're the boss. We'll do a top-end patch. New gaskets, hone the damaged cylinder, and pray. It'll get you on the road." "But Leah, it's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. A Band-Aid is all I need right now," she said. The next morning, Leah walked into the gleaming corporate headquarters of Miller Corp. She had traded her greasy work clothes for the only business attire she owned, a simple, clean pair of slacks and a pressed blouse. She felt out of place in the quiet, climate-controlled lobby, a world away from the noise and grit of a truck stop. She was led into a large boardroom. David Harrison was there, along with a team of lawyers and logistics experts. They looked at her expectantly. Leah took a deep breath and laid it all out. She didn't try to hide her situation. "Mr. Harrison, I want to be transparent," she began. "My truck, the one you saw, is currently undergoing repairs. It will be out of commission for at least a week, possibly more. As of today, my company, Jones Hauling, has 0 operational vehicles." A few of the executives exchanged worried glances. Harrison, however, just listened, his expression neutral. "I know this is not an ideal start," Leah continued, her voice gaining confidence. "But I didn't come here to tell you about my problems. I came here with a solution." She slid a folder across the polished table. "This is my business plan. It's not about one truck. It's about creating a new kind of logistics network in this region." She explained her vision. Instead of building a massive fleet of her own trucks, which would take years and millions in capital, she proposed a coalition of independent owner-operators. The men and women who, like her, were being squeezed out by giants like Cyrus Thorne. There are dozens of skilled, reliable drivers in this valley, she explained. They have their own rigs, but they struggle to get the big contracts. Thorne locks them out. I want to bring them together. Your signing bonus won't go to buying a fleet of new trucks. It will go to building the dispatch, insurance, and compliance infrastructure to support a network of independents. We won't just be a company, we'll be a community. We can be more flexible, more resilient, and more motivated than Thorne's army of salaried drivers. She also addressed the threat of Cyrus head-on. I've received information that Mr. Thorne is already attempting to sabotage my operation by pressuring suppliers. My plan includes establishing new supply lines, sourcing parts from outside his sphere of influence, and using our collective buying power to negotiate better deals for everyone in the network. When she finished, the room was silent. She had laid her cards on the table, showing both her weakness and her strength. David Harrison finally leaned forward. "Ms. Jones," he said slowly, "when we offered you this contract, we were investing in your talent as a mechanic and a driver. It seems we've also invested in a hell of a business strategist." He smiled. "This is a bold plan. It's risky, but it's exactly the kind of innovative thinking we like to see. It attacks Thorne's business model at its weakest point, his reliance on centralized control and his mistreatment of independent contractors." He looked around the table at his team. "We're in. We'll provide the capital. We'll even help you secure those new supply lines through our national network. But the success of this rests on your ability to unite those drivers." Leah felt a profound sense of relief, but also the immense pressure of the task ahead. That evening, she didn't go home. She went to the Iron Skillet, the greasy spoon truck stop diner, where all the local independent drivers congregated. She walked in, and the conversations quieted. Everyone in the room had heard about the race. They saw her as a giant killer, a legend. Now she had to convince them to be her partners. She stood in the middle of the room and spoke, not as a boss, but as one of them. "Most of you know what happened at the fair," she said. "I got lucky. But one lucky day doesn't change the fact that Cyrus Thorne has been pushing us around for years. He undercuts our rates, he strong-arms our customers, and he treats us like we're disposable." A murmur of agreement went through the room. "I now have the Miller Corp contract," she continued. "It's too big for one truck. It's too big for one driver. But it's not too big for all of us. I'm not here tonight to offer you a job. I'm here to offer you a partnership. I'm starting a new company, Jones Hauling, but it's going to be a coalition. We share the loads, we share the profits, and we share the burden. We use our combined strength to fight back. Thorne is already trying to shut me down. He thinks I'm alone. I want to prove him wrong." She saw skepticism on some faces. They were used to looking out for themselves, to a dog-eat-dog world. Trust didn't come easy. Then a familiar voice cut through the silence. It was the trucker who had offered her a job at the fair. "I'm in," he said, standing up. "I'm tired of taking Thorne's table scraps. If there's a real chance to build something for ourselves, I'll take it." Another driver stood up. "Me too. Thorne's been squeezing my fuel supplier for months. We're stronger together." One by one, they stood up. By the end of the night, Leah had verbal commitments from 15 owner-operators. It was a start. It was a fleet. It was a rebellion. As she walked out of the diner into the cool Montana night, she knew the path ahead was fraught with peril. Cyrus Thorne would not take this lying down. He would fight them at every turn. But for the first time, Leah felt like she was no longer just a single person fighting for survival. She was the leader of a movement, born from a single act of defiance at a county fair. She had the contract, she had the capital, and now she had an army. The war for the northern pastures was about to begin in earnest. The first 2 weeks of Jones Hauling were a blur of organized chaos. Leah used a portion of the signing bonus to rent a small, 2-room office above a hardware store in town. It was nothing more than a desk, a few chairs and a large whiteboard, but to Leah it was an empire in the making. While Earl and his team worked tirelessly on Old Blue, Leah worked the phones, turning the verbal commitments from the diner into signed contracts and building the logistical framework for their new coalition. The warning from Marcus Thorne proved to be prophetic. The sabotage began immediately, and it was insidious. The first wall they hit was parts. Earl called his usual suppliers in Bozeman and Billings for the custom gaskets and high-performance piston rings needed for Old Blue's patch job. The answer was the same everywhere. "Sorry, Earl. We just had a run on those parts. Completely out," one would say. "Our shipment got delayed. Might be a month," another would claim. One supplier, an old friend of Earl's, was more honest. "I can't sell them to you, Earl," he whispered over the phone. "Got a call from Thorne's office. He said any shop that does business with Leah Jones is off his approved vendor list. I can't afford to lose his fleet maintenance contract. I'm sorry." Earl hung up the phone, his face grim. "He's choking us off, Leah. He's making it so we can't even get the bolts to put your engine back together." Instead of panicking, Leah felt a cold resolve. This was the game now. She pulled out David Harrison's card and made the call. She explained the situation clearly and concisely. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Consider it handled, Ms. Jones," Harrison said. "Cyrus Thorne may own this county, but Miller Corporation has a national supply chain. Give my assistant a list of every part you need, down to the last washer. You'll have them by air freight in 48 hours. True to his word, 2 days later, a crate of pristine, top-of-the-line engine components arrived at Earl's garage, flown in from a specialty diesel performance shop in Ohio. It was a clear message back to Cyrus. His local influence meant nothing against national power. For the first time, Leah understood the true value of her partnership with Miller Corp. It wasn't just a contract, it was a shield. With the parts in hand, Earl's team finished the patch job. Old Blue roared back to life, the sound a little rougher around the edges, but undeniably strong. It was a wounded warrior but ready for the fight. While the truck was being fixed, Leah focused on her people. She met with each of the 15 drivers, formalizing their partnership agreements. They weren't employees, they were members of the coalition. Jones Hauling would handle dispatch, insurance, and billing, taking a small, transparent percentage to cover overhead and growth. The rest went directly to the owner-operators. It was a model built on trust and mutual benefit, the exact opposite of Thorne's top-down empire. But Cyrus wasn't just attacking her supply lines, he was attacking her army. One of the drivers, a seasoned veteran named Dave, the first man who had stood up for her at the diner, came to her office one afternoon, his face troubled. "Leah, I need to talk to you," he said, closing the door behind him. "I got a call from Hank, Thorne's foreman." Leah's eyes narrowed. What did he want? "He offered me a cash bonus." "A big one," Dave admitted. $5,000. "All I have to do is have some unexpected engine trouble on the day of our first big run for Miller. Just enough to delay the convoy by a day. He said it would be our secret." Leah felt a chill run down her spine. Sabotaging her from the inside, it was a classic Thorne move. "What did you tell him?" she asked, her voice quiet. Dave looked her straight in the eye. "I told him to take his blood money and shove it. I told him I'd rather go broke driving with honor than get rich driving for a snake." He slid a small, cheap audio recorder across her desk. "And I recorded the whole conversation. Just in case you needed it." Leah looked at the recorder, then back at Dave, a wave of respect and gratitude washing over her. "Thank you, Dave. This means more than you know." "We're in this together, Leah," he said. "He thinks he can buy us, because that's all he knows. He doesn't understand what you're building here." The first official job was scheduled for the following week, a massive cattle haul from the Miller Corp ranches in the northern pastures down to the rail yards in Billings. It was a 3-day round trip, requiring a convoy of at least 10 trucks. It was their first test, and the entire county would be watching. If they succeeded, it would solidify their reputation. If they failed, the coalition could fracture before it even began. The morning of the haul was crisp and cold. The sun was just beginning to rise over the mountains. 16 trucks, including Old Blue, were lined up in the staging area of the Miller Ranch, Leah's full coalition, plus her own rig. The drivers were gathered around a portable coffee urn, the air buzzing with nervous energy. Leah stood before them. She wasn't a polished CEO, and she didn't give a fancy speech. She was a trucker talking to truckers. "All right, listen up," she said, her voice carrying in the still morning air. "This is it. This is our first run. Everyone knows the route. Everyone has their assignment. We're going to be professional, we're going to be on time, and we're going to look out for each other." She paused, looking at the faces of the men and women who had put their faith in her. "Thorne is expecting us to fail. He's probably got a few surprises planned for us along the way. T checks, maybe a conveniently broken-down truck on a narrow road. We don't react, we don't get angry. We solve the problem and we keep rolling. Understood?" A chorus of "Yes, ma'am," and determined nods answered her. Leah climbed into the cab of Old Blue, the patched-up engine rumbling beneath her with a steady, reassuring rhythm. She took the lead position. Dave was right behind her. She keyed the CB radio, her voice crackling across the channel to the entire convoy. "All right, Jones hauling. Let's roll." One by one, the trucks pulled out, a long, powerful line of steel and horsepower moving through the Montana dawn. They were a fleet born of defiance, ready to claim the territory that was rightfully theirs. For the first 2 hours, the journey was smooth. They made good time, the convoy operating with a discipline that would have made a drill sergeant proud. Then, just as they were approaching a winding mountain pass, the radio crackled to life. It was the scout truck running 5 miles ahead. "Leah, you're not going to believe this," the driver's panicked voice said. "The pass, it's blocked. There's a Thorne cattle cover truck, a tanker, jackknifed across both lanes. And it looks like he's leaking something all over the road." Undefined. Leah's hand tightened on the CB microphone. "Hold the convoy," she ordered, her voice calm and steady, betraying none of the anger simmering in her gut. "Everyone pull over to the shoulder. Maintain spacing. I'm going up to see it myself." She eased Old Blue forward, passing the long line of her coalition's trucks. The drivers watched her go, their faces grim. They all knew this wasn't an accident. It was a declaration of war. As she rounded the final bend before the pass, she saw it. A gleaming Thorne tanker was positioned perfectly, blocking the entire road. The driver was standing beside it, talking on his phone, looking completely unconcerned. A dark, viscous liquid was slowly spreading from beneath the tanker, pooling on the asphalt. The smell hit her immediately, thick and oily. It wasn't hazardous material, but it was slick. It looked like molasses or a cheap agricultural oil, designed to create a mess and make the road impassable. This was a crude, brutish tactic, but effective. The pass was the only viable route for a convoy of their size. The detour through the old logging roads would take at least 12 hours, making them miss their deadline at the rail yard. A missed deadline on the first run would be a catastrophic failure, a signal to Miller Corp that she couldn't handle the job. Leah pulled up 50 yards from the blockade and killed her engine. She swung down from the cab, her steel-toed boots hitting the pavement with a thud. Dave pulled up behind her and joined her, his face a mask of fury. "That son of a bitch," Dave growled. "He's not even trying to hide it." The Thorne driver saw them approaching and ended his call. He was a big man with a smug look on his face. "Having some trouble, folks?" he asked, feigning innocence. "Blew a hydraulic line. Gonna be a while. Might have to wait for a heavy wrecker from Billings. Could take all day." Leah ignored him. Her eyes were scanning the scene, not as a driver, but as a mechanic, a problem solver. She looked at the jackknife truck, the angle of the trailer, the narrow shoulder of the road, and the steep rocky embankment on the other side. There was no way to drive around it, but maybe there was a way to move it. "Dave," she said, her voice low, "how many of your trucks are carrying heavy-duty winch kits?" Dave thought for a moment. At least 3 of us. Me, Sarah, and Big Mike. We've all got £20,000 winches for recovery jobs. A plan began to form in Leah's mind, audacious and dangerous. "Get on the radio," she ordered. "Tell Sarah and Big Mike to get up here. I want them to position their rigs on the far shoulder, angled toward the front of that tanker, and I need every chain and strap we've got in this convoy. All of them." Dave looked at her, then at the tanker, and a slow grin spread across his face as he understood what she was thinking. "You're not serious." "Thorne wants to block the road," Leah said, a glint in her eye. "Fine, we'll unblock it for him." As Dave relayed the orders, Leah walked over to the Thorne driver. "You've got 5 minutes to get your truck out of the way," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. The driver laughed. "Or what? You gonna push it with your little rust bucket? I've got my orders. I'm not moving." "I didn't say I was going to push it," Leah replied calmly. She turned and walked away. Within minutes, the 3 winch-equipped trucks from her coalition were in position. Drivers from the other trucks ran up, carrying heavy-duty chains and nylon straps, laying them out on the road. Under Leah's direction, they worked with a practiced efficiency that stunned the Thorne driver into silence. They attached 3 separate winch lines to the front frame of the tanker's tractor. Then, Leah directed her team to loop a series of heavy chains around the rear axles of the trailer. Those chains were then connected to the 5th wheel of Old Blue. "Leah, what are you doing?" Dave asked, his voice tight with concern. "You're going to use your truck as the anchor. The patch job on that engine won't take that kind of strain. You could blow it for good." "My truck is the only one with enough torque to pull this off," she said, her focus absolute. "The winches will pull the tractor straight. I'm going to pull the trailer from the rear, breaking the jackknife. We're going to drag his rig right down the road and open up a lane." It was a brute force solution, a massive gamble. If any one of the chains or winch lines snapped, the recoil could be lethal. If her engine failed under the immense load, they would be stranded for good. Leah climbed into Old Blue's cab. She could feel the eyes of her entire team on her. This was more than just clearing a roadblock. This was a test of her leadership, a test of their unity. She keyed the radio, her voice reaching all 3 winch operators and the men on the ground. "All right, everyone, on my count. We're going to apply tension slowly. No jerking. Let the machines do the work. Winches on 1, I'm on 2. Is everyone ready?" 3 clicks came back over the radio. "Ready?" Leah put Old Blue in her lowest gear, the granny gear, designed for maximum torque. She revved the engine, listening to its powerful, uneven heartbeat. "Come on, Blue," she whispered. "One more time." "Tension on 1," she commanded. The high-pitched whine of the 3 electric winches filled the air. The steel cables went taut, groaning under the strain. The front of the Thorne tractor began to creak and shift. "Tension on 2!" Leah yelled. She slowly, carefully let out the clutch. Old Blue shuddered as the slack in the chains disappeared and the full weight of the tanker trailer hit the drivetrain. The engine RPMs dropped, the patched-together C-15 groaning in protest. The rear wheels of her truck began to spin on the oily asphalt. "It's not gripping!" Dave yelled from outside. "I know!" Leah shouted back. She worked the clutch and throttle, a delicate dance of immense power. The engine roared, black smoke pouring from the stacks. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The entire convoy held its breath. Then, with a screech of tortured metal, the tanker moved. The winches pulled the tractor forward, while Old Blue dragged the trailer sideways, the tires of the tanker skidding and smoking across the slick road. It was working. Slowly, inch by agonizing inch, they were pulling the jackknife truck straight, dragging the entire 80,000-pound rig down the road. Inside his cab, the Thorne driver could only watch in disbelief as his truck was manhandled by a coordinated assault of machinery and willpower. Leah kept the pressure on, her eyes glued to her temperature gauge, which was climbing steadily. The engine was screaming, pushed far beyond its limits for the 2nd time in a month, but it held. After 2 minutes that felt like an eternity, they had dragged the tanker a full 50 feet, opening up a single, impassable lane. "That's it! Hold it there!" Leah shouted into the radio. She shut down her engine, the sudden silence ringing in her ears. She could hear her crew cheering, a ragged, triumphant sound echoing through the mountain pass. They had done it. She climbed down from her cab, her legs shaking. The smell of hot metal from her engine was thick in the air. She had won. They had won. They had faced Thorne's sabotage and answered with ingenuity, teamwork, and raw power. The road was open. As the crew worked quickly to unhook the chains and winch lines, Leah walked over to the Thorne driver, who was now leaning against his cab, his face pale and his smugness completely gone. She didn't yell, she didn't threaten, she just looked at him with a quiet, steely disappointment. "Tell Cyrus his plan failed," she said. She then pulled out a small card and handed it to him. It was for a local law firm. "And you might want to call a lawyer. I have a recording of your boss trying to bribe one of my drivers to sabotage this run. I also have dashcam footage from 3 trucks showing your little accident here. You can either be a witness or you can be an accomplice. Your choice." The driver's eyes widened in panic. He looked at the card, then at Leah's unwavering gaze, and finally at the unified crew of Jones Hauling, who were already starting to roll their trucks through the cleared lane. He had been a pawn in a game he now realized his boss had already lost. Leah turned away and keyed her radio. "All right, Jones Hauling, let's get this cattle to Billings. We're burning daylight." The convoy rolled past the disabled tanker, each driver giving a long, defiant blast of their air horn as they passed. They had lost less than an hour. It was a setback, but not a defeat. More importantly, the incident had forged them into something stronger than a coalition. They were a team. They had faced Thorne's best shot and hadn't even flinched. The rest of the trip to Billings was uneventful. They arrived at the rail yard with 2 hours to spare, a testament to their disciplined driving. As the last of the cattle were loaded onto the train cars, David Harrison himself was there to greet Leah. He had a tablet in his hand, a live news feed on the screen. "I thought you'd want to see this," he said, showing her the screen. It was a local news report. The headline read, "Thorne Cattle Co. under investigation for anti-competitive practices." The report detailed an anonymous tip, complete with audio evidence of attempted bribery and video of a staged accident that had been sent to the State Attorney General's office. "The recording Dave made," Leah breathed. "In some footage I may have forwarded from our ranch's security cameras, which happened to overlook the staging area this morning," Harrison added with a slight smile. "Cyrus Thorne built his empire in the shadows. Men like him can't stand the light." The fallout for Cyrus was swift and brutal. The investigation, spurred by the undeniable evidence, uncovered years of strong-arm tactics, price-fixing, and illegal pressure on suppliers. Several of his key corporate partners, spooked by the scandal, pulled their contracts. Drivers, seeing the writing on the wall, began to leave his company, some of them showing up at Leah's little office, asking if the coalition had room for one more. The final blow came a month later. Marcus Thorne, armed with the evidence of his father's illegal activities and the support of the company's board of directors, forced Cyrus into retirement. In a stunning move, Marcus took over as CEO of Thorne Cattle Co. His first official act was to drive to Leah's office. Leah saw the familiar Thorne Company pickup pull up and braced herself for a confrontation. But it was Marcus who stepped out, his expression serious. "Miss Jones," he said, extending a hand, "I've come to apologize. On behalf of my family and my company. What my father did was wrong, and it's over." Leah shook his hand, sensing a sincerity that had been entirely absent in his father. "I'm restructuring the entire company," Marcus continued. "We're going to compete on service and reliability, not intimidation. And to prove it, I want to make you an offer. The Northern Pastures contract is yours. You won it fair and square. But there's more than enough work in this valley for both of us. I'd like to propose a partnership." We can handle the long-haul routes that are our specialty, and your coalition can handle the regional and specialized hauls. We can even share supply lines and maintenance resources. We can compete, but we don't have to be enemies." Leah looked at the young man, who was so different from his father. She saw an opportunity not for revenge, but for something better, a stable, prosperous future for her drivers and the entire community. "I think," she said, a small smile touching her lips, "we can work with that." 6 months later, the landscape of trucking in Montana had changed. Jones Hauling had grown to a coalition of over 50 independent owner-operators with a reputation for being the most reliable and resourceful outfit in the state. Leah had moved into a larger office with a proper dispatch center, but she still spent most of her days in the garage with Earl, her hands covered in grease. Old Blue had been fully restored. The patch job was replaced with a complete professional rebuild, a gift from the coalition drivers as a thank you to their leader. The faded blue paint was replaced with a deep, brilliant cobalt, with the Jones Hauling logo proudly displayed on the doors. But underneath the new paint and polished chrome, it was still the same truck, with the same monstrous custom-built engine at its heart. One sunny afternoon, Leah stood by her truck at the same fairgrounds where it all began. The Agri-Expo was on again, but this time Old Blue wasn't shoved to the side. It was the centerpiece of the Engine Expo. A crowd gathered around it, not to mock, but to admire. Young mechanics and aspiring drivers looked at the twin-turbo C-15 with awe, listening as Leah explained how she built it. She was no longer the outsider. She was the standard. She had proven that it wasn't about the chrome on the outside, but the power, skill, and heart you had on the inside. She had faced down humiliation and sabotage, and had transformed it not just into victory, but into a legacy. If you watched until the end, show your support by commenting with "I watched until the end" and click the video on your screen right now for another incredible story. 2 years later, the name Jones Hauling wasn't just known in Bozeman, it was respected across the entire state of Montana. The small 2-room office above the hardware store was a distant memory. The new headquarters was a purpose-built facility on the industrial edge of town, featuring a modern dispatch center with a wall of screens, a comfortable lounge for drivers, and a massive 6-bay service garage that was Leah's personal domain. But Leah Jones wasn't sitting behind a polished desk. She was where she had always been most comfortable, under a truck. Dressed in grease-stained coveralls, she slid out from beneath a brand-new Freightliner, a complex diagnostic tablet in her hand. "The fuel pressure sensor is giving a ghost reading," she said to the young mechanic, a woman named Maya, who she'd recently hired as her first apprentice. "The factory software says it's fine, but it's lying. Look at the live data stream when I rev it. It's lagging by a half-second. That's why it's hesitating on the grades." Earl, now semi-retired but still a constant presence in the garage, chuckled from his stool by the workbench. "Still don't trust the computers, do you, Leah?" "I trust what the engine tells me," Leah replied, wiping her hands on a rag. "The computer is just a translator, and sometimes it gets the language wrong." She handed the tablet to Maya. "Run a bypass and see if it smooths out. I'll bet you a steak dinner it does." This was the new normal. Jones Hauling was a thriving enterprise, a coalition that now numbered over 70 owner-operators. They had become the gold standard for reliability in the region. Their model, built on respect and shared profit, had attracted the best drivers. They were making more money and had more control over their lives than they ever had working under Thorne's old system. Dave, the driver Cyrus had tried to bribe, had just paid off his mortgage and was now the coalition's elected safety supervisor. The relationship with Thorne Cattle Co. had also settled into a surprising, productive rhythm. The rivalry was still there, but it was professional, not personal. Later that afternoon, Marcus Thorne came to the garage, not in a pickup, but in a practical sedan. He wasn't there to intimidate, he was there for a planning meeting. The state just released the winter forecast, Marcus said, unrolling a map on the hood of a nearby truck. They're predicting record snowfall in the Beaverhead Pass starting in November. If they close it, our long-haul routes are cut off. Leah studied the map. And our regional runs get hit twice as hard. The ranches up there will be isolated. Exactly, Marcus said. My team has a plan for prepositioning fuel and feed, but we don't have the flexibility your coalition does. I was hoping we could coordinate. Your drivers know those back roads better than anyone. If we pay a premium, could Jones Hauling guarantee emergency supply runs if the main highway closes? It was a simple business proposition, built on mutual need and respect for each other's strengths. This was the new way. The old war was over, replaced by a competitive but collaborative peace that was making everyone more money and making the entire region's supply chain more resilient. Draw up the terms, Leah said. We'll make it work. As Marcus left, Leah got in Old Blue to head home. The truck was no longer her daily workhorse. It was a symbol, but she still drove it at least once a week just to feel the raw, unfiltered power and remember where she came from. On her way out of town, she passed the Iron Skillet Diner. Through the large window, she saw a solitary figure sitting in a corner booth. It was Cyrus Thorne. He was older, smaller somehow, his once imposing frame now stooped. He nursed a cup of coffee, staring out the window but seeing nothing. A few years ago, his entrance would have caused the entire diner to fall silent with a mixture of fear and deference. Now, nobody even glanced his way. The waitresses refilled his coffee with the same indifferent efficiency they showed everyone else. He was no longer a king or a tyrant. He was just an old man, a ghost haunting the ruins of an empire he had built and then lost through his own arrogance. His punishment wasn't prison or poverty, it was irrelevance. Leah didn't feel anger or pity. She felt nothing at all. She just kept driving. Back at her garage, Maya was waiting for her. The young mechanic's eyes were shining. "You were right," she said. "The bypass worked. The engine is running like a dream. How did you know?" Leah smiled and popped the latches on Old Blue's cab, tilting it forward to reveal the gleaming, perfectly maintained C-15 engine. "Because every engine has a story," she said, pointing to a custom machined part on the fuel rail. "You just have to learn how to listen to it. This one taught me everything I know." She had started with nothing but a junk truck and a fire in her heart. She had been laughed at, humiliated, and sabotaged. But by trusting her own two hands and believing in the power of community, she had not only built a company, she had rebuilt an entire industry, one piston, one driver, one act of defiance at a time. The quiet rumble of the engines in her garage was the sound of her victory, a victory that would echo through the valleys of Montana for a long time to come. And so, the story of Leah Jones and Old Blue comes to a close. But it's a story that doesn't truly end at the fairgrounds or in a corporate boardroom. It continues in every engine that fires up in the Jones Hauling garage, in every independent driver who now runs their routes with a sense of ownership and pride, and in the quiet, respectful hum of a local industry that was transformed by one woman's refusal to be silenced. This was never just a story about a truck. It was a story about what lies beneath the surface. Cyrus Thorne looked at Leah and saw a woman he thought he could dismiss. He looked at her truck and saw a piece of junk he could mock. He failed to see the years of hard work, the brilliant mechanical mind, the unshakable courage that were hidden under that faded blue paint. He judged the cover and was completely destroyed by the story inside. It serves as a powerful reminder: the most dangerous people are the ones you underestimate. The greatest strength is often the strength that doesn't need to be loud or flashy, but is simply there, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Leah's power wasn't just in the engine she built, it was in the way she built her business. Cyrus Thorne's empire was a pyramid, with him at the top, ruling through fear and intimidation. It was heavy, rigid, and ultimately brittle. When one major piece was pulled out, the whole thing began to crumble. Leah, on the other hand, built a network, a coalition. Her power wasn't held over people, it was shared between them. Every driver who joined her wasn't just an employee, they were a partner. When Thorn tried to attack them, he wasn't attacking a single target. He was attacking a community, and the community fought back, stronger together than they ever were apart. It shows that true, lasting power comes from lifting others up, not from holding them down. Think about the key moments in this story. The initial humiliation, a moment designed to break Leah's spirit. The incredible reveal of the engine, turning shock into respect. The high-stakes race, where skill triumphed over a blank check. And finally, the roadblock, where brute force sabotage was defeated by intelligent, coordinated teamwork. Each of these moments was a test, and each time, Leah and her allies chose a better way forward. They answered arrogance with competence, intimidation with unity, and hatred with an unwavering focus on the job. That is the essence of true victory. It's not just about winning the race. It's about proving that your way of running it is fundamentally better. We tell these stories because we believe they matter. They remind us of the strength within ourselves and the power we have to change the world around us, even if it's just our own small corner of it. Leah's journey is an inspiration to anyone who has ever been told they don't belong, that their dreams are too big, or that their appearance doesn't match their ambition. Now, we want to hear from you. What part of Leah's story hit you the hardest? Was it the moment of the reveal, when the laughter of the crowd turned to stunned silence? Or was it the quiet moment of victory, seeing Cyrus Thorn reduced to a forgotten man in a diner? We all have challenges in our lives, moments where we feel underestimated. Your stories and your support are the fuel that keeps this channel going. If you were inspired by Leah's journey from underdog to industry leader, please take a second to hit that like button. It truly helps us reach more people with these powerful messages. And if you're new here, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you never miss another story of justice and vindication. And for those of you who are the core of this community, who stay with us through every twist and turn of the story, we have a special request. To let us know you made it all the way, please comment below with the simple phrase, "I watched until the end." It's a small thing, but it means the world to us. It tells us that these detailed, in-depth stories are worth telling. Thank you for spending your time with us today. The story doesn't have to end here. There is another incredible video waiting for you right on your screen. We've chosen it just for you, and we think you'll find it just as compelling. Click on that video now, and we'll see you over there.